Conversations with Psychologists, Alara Hedebring and Larissa Predy talk all about kids at home with ADHD in isolation during the COVID-19 pandemic. Have you heard from parents what they're thinking these days?
Well, I mean, most certainly the parents that we have been supporting really have been voicing that they do miss the routines of school, and they have a new appreciation of all of the wonderful things that teachers do in terms of supporting their little ones, not just with learning, but also with things like orienting attention, staying in your seat, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, and especially the teachers then who are doing the online, it's going to be difficult for them to kind of rein those kids in and provide that extra support, right?
Oh yes, parents have a whole new role in these pandemic times.
Yes, definitely. So what was kind of interesting, I found this article, and it's called How Do Children and Adolescents with ADHD Experience Lockdown During a COVID-19 Outbreak? And it's by a team of the main researcher Bobo and his colleagues. It's from France. So when the city went into lockdown for the first time, between days 20 and 30, they put out a social media ask for information from the families about their kids with ADHD and what that was like for them. What's happening for these kids and what's your experience being at home with them? And the neat thing is that it was really split, almost a third of in each category of whether things were going really well, whether things were kind of just fairly normal, typical, and whether things were worsening. So I thought that was really interesting to find out that especially the third who were saying things were better. I love it. It makes me happy.
It gives people hope. It gives people hope in the pandemic. But that is, honestly, that is a very interesting finding, because honestly, you know, from what we know with ADHD and the parents that we support, that those routines are so critical, though that structure, those supports that they have in class are really essential to learning. However, I mean, I guess if you're taking a different tack and thinking about it, having, access to spending more time outside and burning some energy and maybe doing some, big body activities, maybe there is a silver lining in all of this, pandemic crisis for people who are supporting their kiddos with ADHD.
Yeah. I wonder about expectations in the home. Like, what are we seeing in terms of demand for homework? And is there that capacity to take a break? And in some households and in some settings, maybe that's not as possible to go out and run in a big yard or something like that, right? Like maybe that's not accessible. And so now the child is more cooped up. The breaks aren't physical activity. What are some of those strategies? What are some of those things that we might recommend if kids are kind of stuck at home? For kids with ADHD, maybe various ages. We could talk about the younger kids and some of the older ones, especially now with the junior highs and high schools in our area being on lockdown for the next, month? Almost just over a month. Are there some specific strategies that are your go-tos that you recommend to families, maybe for those high school students where technology is kind of the main go-to activity?
Really comes back to that the coaching of self-monitoring. So it's so easy to get off task, and especially the Zoom fatigue is definitely a real thing. And so something to encourage and empower your team is to teach them, of course, to kind of self-monitor, have that check-in in 5 minutes. Am I still on task? Having even just a very easy peasy kind of just a checklist beside the computer, a physical one, kind of go old school and use a pen and paper, if you will. But to check in and am I really still attending, or have I drifted off into, maybe I'm on YouTube instead of, on my, maybe I'm lost. Yeah, maybe I've, and so I think one of the critical strategies for teens, because they are, yes, their prefrontal cortexes are still developing, but it can be learned, that task of self-monitoring, and it allows them to have that ability to be in charge of checking in. Am I still attending to the task that I need to be? Am I even still on the video that the teacher is presenting on, or have I drifted off into the YouTube universe? So that's definitely one that I certainly suggest and seems to be well received by, maybe not always implemented independently at first.
Exactly.
Parents do check in on that whole self-monitoring task. But it is definitely one to work towards becoming more independent and more in charge kind of the uniqueness of your executive functioning challenges.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, that piece that you're saying around coaching it, so that it isn't something that it comes instinctively, that the person in the household who maybe doesn't have ADHD might feel like it's fairly obvious that, you know, you would check in and notice when your attention drifts, or that you might, you know, have a thought that you go, oh, I have to pay that bill, or whatever it is for an adult, and then remember that, okay, I can deal with that later. It's on my task list. I'll get to it, right? But for the individual with ADHD, that it's not actually that easy, and that the thought is suddenly going to take you down that rabbit hole. And so having a way to kind of check in, whether I've sometimes even had it where it's like a timer, right? Every half hour or so, there's just a little like bing that just, you can go, oh, right, I'm supposed to be doing that thing. Yeah, I love that idea. And I just love the emphasis on coaching. We might expect a 14, 15, 16-year-old to be fairly independent. That might not be the case for our ADHD folks.
No, most certainly not. So, you know, definitely and I think any strategy, of course, it's not just kind of a one and done. Needs to be practiced together collaboratively, and then monitored of, does this work for me? Is this something that's actually increasing my attention and allowing me to stay on my Zoom, my teacher Zoom situation longer and more attentively? So yeah, 100%.
Well, something else that I thought was really interesting is that this study that I was mentioning came out in March, April. So not only was it in France in the spring, so things might have looked a little bit different. It was also at the beginning of the pandemic. So, you know, it might not have been as long of a kind of persistent drive of having to work from home and be online, right? And so there may be a different experience there. So I'm interested to know if things are a bit different now in particularly our area. So I'm thinking about putting out a survey, and I'm going to link it to this video, just for our local area, for parents who have kids with ADHD, in Alberta specifically, just because we are maybe a bit more wintry than other places,
Right.
and just seeing what is it like here now having our ADHD kids at home, because I think it could be quite different.
You know what? I 100% agree. I can imagine being in France in the spring. You know,
it sounds like a lovely time.
But you know what? I think that's amazing, because I would definitely, as you know, I fully support amplifying the voices of the parents that we serve, and really helping everybody understand kind of what we're going through together as a community. And it certainly can give hope to other parents. You know, perhaps, you know, there will be some silver linings that we can pull from that. And at the very least, you know what, I think everybody deserves and does understand the validation of, this is hard. This is 100% a difficult, new, uncharted territory, but we're in it together. So I think that's a great idea, Larissa. And I think, you know, we at Little Oaks definitely would love to be part of furthering research and helping our community.
I think it's going to be really interesting to find out from these parents. The other piece is what you just mentioned, is that layering idea. So like, there's the challenge, the fundamental challenge of having your kids at home, right? Now there's the extra added challenge of having them at home for maybe like a longer period of time, and maybe an unpredictable period of time. And so, you know, those extra pieces of social disconnect, or, you know, the energy of the household shifting, or the expectations in the household shifting. Now we're in one place all together all day long. What's the kind of shift in parenting that might have to happen in terms of, you know, when do chores actually get done? Is the expectation now that 14 hours a day, I'm potentially going to have this chore list on my mind, and I don't get a break? And so when I'm doing school, I'm not focused on that thing. You know what I mean? So like, I think there's a shift that needs to occur, and it's not necessarily clear what that is at this point, because this is all new. We're all experiencing this for the first time, you know. But I would say, you know, that a lot of the families that I'm working with that are particularly young teens, so kind of that, say like maybe even 11 being the youngest teen, 11 to kind of 15 even, that there's this shift in terms of puberty and that things are already, I don't want to say blowing up, blowing up. So they are changing in the home. The dynamic is changing. And so I think there's a patience that needs to be had and a self-compassion from both parents and youth, that this experience that they're having that normally gets kind of filtered through their school, through their friends, through all their different activities and experiences, is now happening all in one setting potentially. Right?
That's right.
So that's going to look and feel really different too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I can't even tell you how many parents I've been working with that have sung the praises of teachers as heroes. You know, holy man, I miss school and I really wish, I don't know how they do it. So, you know, any teacher parents out there, you know that your work is appreciated, and, you know, this is giving a whole new perspective, and that filtering is now happening all in one place, like you say, and it's looking different and it's tough. Yeah. And we've got hormones, we've got all kinds of things that are coming into play, and the richness of adolescence and the wildness, which is always what makes it fun, right?
That's right. I love the wildness. So I think it's really cool too to mention the teachers. I think that's a really important point, because there's probably, you know, in the scheme of things, a handful, like a, you know, small percentage of parents who feel like they're willing and capable of being an at-home teacher parent, right? Mm-hmm. So unfortunately that has fallen on parents who maybe weren't prepared or weren't feeling like that was their calling. So, you know, in cases with ADHD, especially with youth, a lot of times I will recommend to parents that if extra help needs to be had, so like in terms of learning disabilities in addition or anything, if there's extra support and extra time needed at home for homework, which most likely there is, I often recommend, if they can afford it, to have a tutor involved or something, because that takes the pressure off the parent, takes the strain off the relationship, and that tension can be dissolved a little bit. And so in these times, it might even be something that they look into, having a learning specialist or a teacher assistant, or someone who's willing to put in maybe that extra little bit of time as almost like a tutor, right? Mm-hmm. And instead of having the parent be that entire role, right?
No, and absolutely, that is something that I've heard from many parents is that wish of, you know, what exists out there, and is it, you know, do you guys even at Little Oaks have somebody that could help me, you know, with this learning stuff? And so, you know, that is a common theme that comes up, and mm-hmm. I can empathize and understand. It's exhausting to put on the hat of teacher, in addition to, you know, parent, in addition to whatever other roles that you've got going on. 100%.
Yeah. Well, and you know, our lovely Sherry Gallant, who's our certified teacher and behavior specialist, I mean, I think she'd be happy to be supporting families at this time, and she is. The ones that she is working with, I think, have had a lot of success in her supports. But another option could even be ADHD coaching, right? Where, you know, you get someone to just help with the organizational strategies. And then it's not coming from parent. Like, I feel like one of the things I say a lot, especially in therapy, is that my role isn't necessarily a lot different than the parent role. I have some of the strategies and the tools and the things and to recommend that maybe you don't know of, but could potentially find out. But as a therapist being involved with a child, you're usually you're just an external being, and you're in a different position, and they tend to take that information differently from you than from the parent. So, I mean, the empathy that I have for parents who are experiencing struggles through this is enormous. And if you can, I highly recommend reaching out for supports, and that it's okay to ask for help and support in these times, right? Because that's even from friends and family.
Yeah, and it's okay to want to not have to be the one that has to nag and you know, kind of follow up on all of these things that maybe a teacher would have had to do in the past. It's okay to want to safeguard your relationship with your kid and reach out to either an ADHD coach or a learning specialist or somebody to kind of help alleviate the burden. 100%.
Yeah. And one last thing I want to touch on before we stop for today, I wanted to just quickly touch on those successful kids. That for some of the parents where things are going really well at home under these circumstances, that the child's able to stand up when they need to, able to take breaks when they need to, able to just say stop, right? And have a lot more one-on-one time potentially with support from parents. There might be fears, anxieties, worries about their child going back to the regular system after this. So I'm interested to know, especially from those parents, what their plans are, what they're thinking they're going to do. But generally speaking, you know, from a school district perspective, having been in the system, what would you recommend to parents who are saying, you know, I've figured out some tools and some strategies that really work for my kid. Is there a way I can talk to the school and get this to happen there? What would you suggest?
Oh my goodness. I certainly, I hope that there are parents that have had that aha moment over this last grueling period. And what I would suggest is don't be shy. Reach out to your school, reach out to your teacher. It really is meant to be a collaborative relationship. Share the wonderful successes that you've had in terms of breaks, in terms of how your kid, you know, if he can move his body in this way, you get so much more work done, or you know, share all of these successes with your school and, you know, make it a running conversation that can be built into an IEP or a PLP on return to school. And you know what? There's another piece of this and something I've heard from parents as well. And, you know, parents obviously have the right to make informed choices for their children, 100%. But a lot of parents too are considering doing the homeschooling thing. They're loving they're loving the craziness. They're loving the, you know, diving right in and learning with their kids. And so, you know, my advice to parents, whatever you do next in terms of celebrating your successes or, you know, choosing a different path, is just to make sure you reach out and collaborate with your school, because they're there to support you. They're there to support your child, and really they're there to kind of put in place those things that your child really needs. So that would be my advice. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Open up the conversation.
That's right.
I love it. Great. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Alara. This has been a really great conversation, and I can't wait
to be back.
Yeah, I can't wait to get our feedback from parents on what's going on out there. So we are going to be doing this once a month, you and I together.
Right.
Nice little short conversations about really important topics, hopefully. And we'll also have little short clips in between of little conversations with other psychologists that I'm going to be bringing around. So we look forward to seeing everybody on an ongoing basis. Take care.
That's right.